This is a really interesting topic for all of us. So please welcome Jodie.
Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. Actually, since lunch was quite early, I'm a little bit worried that people have got kind of breakfast and lunch stacked up together. So, I've got a couple of things. I've got a video as well, so hopefully that'll keep everyone wide awake. So, what we wanted to do was actually deliver something quite new for this conference. So, sometimes we've had CI managers come to us and say, okay, I'd love to know some really unbiased, unfiltered research about what my customers, so brand teams, as you see, all the way up to CEOs, what they like from CI. And I've heard a lot at this conference from Daniel especially, Ken, Carlos as well, a lot about decision making, about how we make decisions. So what we wanted to look at was how CI is used to make decisions. And I think that hopefully sets the scene for this presentation. And I'll tell you just a little bit about myself. So I'm Jodie Peake. I'm actually based in San Francisco. I've been working in CI for just over 10 years. Strictly life sciences CI. My background's actually in economics. I focused on the economics of fear and how fear applies to decision making. Because clearly we have to get over our fears to make decisions. So for me, personally, that's kind of a little bit about where this research kind of started in my head when we were thinking this up. So, just to tell you a little bit about the company, we've got a very short video to play you. This quote, deciding what not to do is as important as deciding what to do. It's really crucial. I can think back on countless projects over the last 10 years where there have definitely been recommendations that a clinical trial should be stopped, drug development should be halted, etc. Think about the millions of dollars that go into drug development. So I think this is really, really pertinent in this whole topic. So let me tell you a little bit about the study. I did all the interviews myself. So if you've got any questions, then hopefully I'll be a good person to answer those questions. We interviewed 15 people so far, but this is ongoing. And as you can imagine, these are very, very busy people. It's been quite hard, and sometimes I had 8 rescheduled appointments to actually fix an interview. But the interviews were 20 to 45 minutes in length, all on the phone. And what we tried to get out of the different stakeholders were discussions and directional information around these topics here. And this is what we're going to be presenting today. Our findings, we've definitely got some interesting findings, but we've tried to turn it into some learnings for those of you here who are CI managers. So hopefully you'll be able to take something away from this as well. So we're looking at what we can learn about the role of CI in the decision-making process, how to ensure CI is a very valuable tool in the decision-making process, why internal clients turn to CI instead of other information sources, what makes a successful CI project. This was something that we directly asked the stakeholders. In a perfect world, what would be an ideal CI project? And finally, some comments, some advice perhaps about how these clients, your internal customers, like to see CI organized internally. So to give you an idea of who we spoke to, we're starting at the lower level, being brand level, and then all the way up to C-suite. So we've got brand directors, we've got global brand directors, and these range from American, European, Swiss, and we've also got one Chinese participant as well. I would caveat this by saying that we wanted to bring something new to the conference, but most of the respondents are European and American. But we also have an Indonesian respondent as well. And as we continue with this research, we're definitely going to have more participants from Asia. I can tell you now that some of the respondents, you work for the same companies. So potentially, these would be good insights that you could maybe take back to your companies today. So moving up a level, we've got global marketing level, and then all the way up to Senior Vice President of Commercial Operations, Chief Business Officer, Chief Information Officer. So we're right at the C-suite level. You'll see these different colours represented throughout the presentation. To give you an idea, if we've got some quotes, we'll give you an idea of what type of respondent said that quote. So first of all, jumping into what we can learn about the role of CI in the decision-making process. So the first question I actually asked all of the respondents was, how many decisions do they typically make every day? And all of the European respondents said, do you mean what to wear every day? All of the American respondents said, do you mean what to have for lunch every day? So there kind of difference of opinion there about what was a valuable decision. But on average, these business leaders made about 7 business decisions a day, of which they deemed 1 to be business critical. So this was one really, really important yes, no, go, no go decision per day. And obviously there's a need for information when it comes to these decisions that are being made. We then wanted to go a little bit deeper and ask about the biggest decisions that these respondents have made over the last 12 months. These are then organised here, as you can see, in terms of which ones were mentioned most often. And I think what's interesting here is, yes, you see product launch, you see product positioning, portfolio management coming up a lot. And they were mentioned many times as the biggest decisions that these types of respondents made each year. I see some people nodding their heads, so clearly this is the type of CI that you're delivering to your internal customers already. But I think looking a bit further down, some of the interesting decisions that were being made center around raising capital, restructuring, HR decisions, acquisitions. So CI was also playing a big part in some of these other decisions. So I think it's important for us to just think about getting CI in front of different people within the company, and also spreading how CI can help them with these types of decisions. So we then wanted to understand how decisions are made. So we learned a little bit about what were typical decisions these people were making, but how do they go about making them? What is the process that they go through? And one thing, we've got a few slides that cover this, but one thing that came out, and it seems like it might be fairly obvious, but there are definitely some learnings we can take from it. Smaller teams tend to make decisions faster. Larger teams need more information, tend to be slower. There's a great quote here by a brand director who I actually worked with on many projects over many years, saying they were team decisions, and that's why they were never made. Clearly many decisions are made in a team, but I think what's important to learn here is that we can tailor how much information we actually deliver by really understanding who the team membership, who the team is composed of, and who the key customer is in the team. So who's actually going to be making the decision? Who's the most important person? It's not necessarily the most senior person. Like, seeing this myself, there may be somebody who's kind of nominated to actually make that decision, and the senior person will sign off on it, of course. So I think we can learn to ensure that there is value in the CI we deliver, to make sure we know who that decision maker is, and how much information do we need to actually deliver. Understanding that can really help CI always be a valuable tool for making decisions. So we then asked all the respondents what they typically used to make these big decisions that they made over the last 12 months. And you'll see market research is pretty much at the top in terms of what was used. And I'll explain that. But you will also see CI featuring very, very heavily. So from the left, we've got brand team level, then business unit director, then SVP and above, all the way up to C-suite CEO level. And I think what's interesting here is that yes, market research is often used, but there's a reason for that. And doing these interviews is a big reason for that. Market research was typically readily available. It was either available in the company, or there was an off-the-shelf report that they could obtain, or if it wasn't secondary market research, it was primary market research that they had, and they felt like things hadn't changed, things hadn't moved on that much. So it was typically easier to get hold of. And that's why we often see market research kind of at the forefront. So CI is competing for budget with market research, but we also typically heard from respondents that market research is a lot more expensive. We had 5, even 10 times more expensive for a kind of similar amount of information to help make a decision. A couple of other points that were interesting here. Some of the smaller companies, some of the biotechs that we spoke with, they would sometimes speak with KOLs directly. So they wouldn't go to an agency or a vendor. They would actually form an ad board themselves. It's quite an interesting approach there. And also large pharma tended to have a much better structure of actually looking at internal knowledge, internal expertise. So I guess what came out was those who didn't say that they worked for a large pharma and they were using internal expertise really thought, well, hang on, should I be looking inside? Should I be looking at what we know inside more before going outside and maybe using an agency to answer those really hard to answer questions? I think something else that was really fascinating and maybe made some of the respondents think was about having this availability of research. So as I said, sometimes market research is more readily available. But we often saw brand team members having a much more immediate need for primary research. Obviously they've got different decisions to make compared to those senior managers. The senior managers would often initially refer to an easy access secondary source. So we see a difference between the levels of kind of business leaders here in terms of what they're reaching for to make decisions. And one thing that was also very interesting was the need for a centralized platform. So Carlos, you nicely presented the SharePoint platform that you've built. And we were only lucky enough to see the landing page, but it looks very inviting. So having maybe a SharePoint platform or whatever other system that you like to use, especially for senior management as well, is seen as being really, really valuable. So they don't know where to go to get some of this research. There may have been a CI project already completed. Can the CI manager make that readily accessible to senior management? Do they know where they can get it from without necessarily calling you and asking you? So they do like to do some of this themselves, believe it or not. So another point that came out really clearly from these interviews was about the lack of a standard operating procedure when it comes to decision making. We had some of the respondents saying that for a major acquisition or in-licensing deal, sometimes they would look at CI market research and they would commission both types of projects. They would also interview internal experts in the company. Other times, they perhaps only did market research or only did CI. So there was no kind of SOP in place. I think that's really interesting because that does open up an opportunity, I feel, for CI to really get its place in an SOP. So if you can help generate an SOP inside your company for decision making and make sure CI is there, so that when there is a decision about restructuring or a decision about hiring a sales rep about an acquisition, if CI is written into an SOP, then it's going to be hard to actually not use it. So I think this is perhaps one of the more obvious outcomes of the research, but I feel like it's still interesting to comment on. And we talked about the size of teams being important when you're looking at decision making and the value of CI. Something else that we found was the bigger the decision, the more information is required typically to make that decision. It sounds pretty obvious. Smaller decision, less information. And most likely you're going to see with a bigger decision, a bigger team. Smaller decision, a smaller team. So it sounds fairly obvious, fairly logical, but again, what can we learn from this? I think what we can learn from it is that for CI to have a seat at the decision-making table and always ensure it's delivering value is that we understand what level of information is really needed from CI to help make that decision. We heard a lot over the last day or two about big data. Some great presentations about big data. I've seen a lot of pictures of people drowning in sheets of paper. We want to avoid that. We don't want to deliver so much CI data that those making the decision think, okay, well, I can't possibly use this CI data because there's just way too much. And it may be amazing information. There may be key bits of intelligence that would really help them make that decision, but they're drowning in the data. So if we can summarize, if we can just deliver what will actually help move their thinking forward, then that can be really valuable in ensuring that CI has a place in the decision-making process. But equally, if you know your audience, perhaps some people really like a lot of data. Perhaps there are decision makers who really want to pour over a lot of data, a lot of data points and intelligence from a lot of different sources. So if you know your audience, and you understand the decision, whether it is a big decision or a smaller decision, you can then start to tailor what you deliver to those decision makers. I think that's something that definitely came out quite strongly from the interviews. As I say, it's a fairly simple, logical answer from the respondents, but I think definitely something we can learn from. Okay, so we're going to look in a little bit more detail about why internal clients might turn to CI instead of other information sources. This is clearly what we want them to do. So, in speaking to these people from these small, medium, big pharma companies, it was really interesting to learn another word that kept coming out. It was actually repeated in the interviews, and the word was confidence. Everyone wanted confidence to make their decisions confidently. And that is what they felt CI and other information sources could help bring. So I'm going to reflect on that word confidence quite a few times over the next few slides. But they definitely understood that CI will often give you information that isn't available from market research. There's often a challenge that we have on the agency side. When a new client may call us and say, can you do this, this, or that? Is that possible? Can I just use market research to gather that? And you have to explain CI processes to them and explain, and I'm sure you've done this to your internal stakeholders, explain what can be obtained by CI and what can't, and the value that CI can give you over and above market research. However, some respondents still didn't understand what was actually obtainable using CI. So I think we've really got a task on our hands to try and educate as many stakeholders as possible in terms of what CI can actually deliver. And that really was fascinating for me because this global brand manager, I'd worked with them for a long time. They should have had a really, really good idea of what CI can deliver. But then I thought about it, and we were actually delivering kind of the same projects to them again and again, which was what they needed. But they didn't necessarily understand what else they could use CI for. They were happy with the CI, but didn't know what else they could use it for. So I think if we can continue educating those stakeholders, then we can definitely improve the position of CI and make it used even more. I touched on budgetary requirements for CI. And the good thing is, most of the respondents actually did understand the importance of investing properly in CI activities. Whether that's headcount, whether that's attending conferences for your internal teams, whether that's using vendors, they understand that it came at a cost. It wasn't free. You weren't working for free. No one was working for free. And there were definitely some comments about CI offering higher value, high return on investment and value compared to market research, for example. Market research costs typically 5 to 10 times the budget of comparable CI, according to some of the respondents we spoke to. Which is, I mean, as a company we work in CI and market research and market access. So we know, looking at the types of projects that we run, it's probably about right. So we definitely need to continue to stress the importance of CI in terms of what you get. So you know the phrase bang for your buck. So stressing what you'll get from spending X dollars on headcount or a CI project, for example. And I love this quote from a global brand manager, just explaining that sometimes they have to understand, and sometimes they do understand, that sometimes you need to spend more in order to get the results you need. If you try and spend less, then sometimes you'll be disappointed in the results, and then it's a waste of money. So then we looked at, in an ideal world, what makes a really successful CI project in the eyes of these internal clients. And this was pretty fascinating to hear what was repeated by many of the respondents, and I was hearing a lot of the same words without prompting the respondents. Words such as it encourages team agreement. So we touched on the size of the team and how to have consensus amongst the team members. Credible intelligence. So by that we're looking at the types of sources, the number of sources, and corroborated, validated intelligence. And that it assists decision making as well. So these types of things would be considered a valuable and successful CI project. So then CI would be used. But what about the other side of the table where CI wouldn't be used? What can cause that? One of the key things we heard was if the results seem illogical. So if somebody hasn't done a real-world sanity check on the results come in, they look fantastic. You've got all the sales rep numbers, you've got all the MSL numbers, you've got all the detailing frequencies. But is it even possible for a sales rep to see this many physicians in a week? So doing that sanity check is extremely valuable. And sometimes a lack of insightful recommendations, and this is from our side, on the vendor side, as well as on the client side as well, working with CI managers. We've both got a responsibility to really partner and collaborate on these insights. You will know your internal company, your internal stakeholders' decisions and demands often better than we will. But then we can work together to come up with really plausible insights and recommendations. Now, one thing that I found really interesting when speaking to some of the much more senior stakeholders, all the way down to brand level as well, in terms of what would actually, for them, make a successful CI project, if they were just to summarize. A lot of comments on the previous slide. And really what they said was they weren't looking for a report with hundreds of new pieces of intelligence. They were looking for confidence, and often they were looking to have their assumptions validated and confirmed. Maybe with a few golden nuggets that were just unknown to them before. So I think that's really positive for us, that these internal stakeholders aren't expecting the world. They're not expecting everything to be new and something that they didn't know before. So I think we can all take something away from that, that if we confirm assumptions and give them confidence in their assumptions to make those decisions, that goes a long way. Something else that came out was a failure to address the real business issue. When we're looking at making decisions, if we are working to understand what the core decision is, that sets us up for success, because then it flows down, the questions that are asked are going to be relevant to that decision, and then we end up with something very important, decision-focused CI being delivered. So if we're not aware of what the actual decision is, needs to be made, then we're really setting ourselves up for a really tricky journey right from the start. So understanding what that decision is, ultimately, was really, really important. And you can see from the Chief Business Officer we spoke to here, actually said ensuring the questions are written so they're tied to the decision being made was what he saw as being one of the most critical success factors. So some other aspects that were really valued by these stakeholders. One of the comments that came out was if you don't digest it for the audience, it's not going to get used. Perhaps you've all encountered that. You've delivered a great report and it's not used internally to help make that decision. And one of the things that actually was mentioned, and mentioned quite a few times, was sending out an email. If you can summarize the intelligence in the body and the text of the email, as opposed to them having to open up the document, that was extremely valuable. That was one of the most valued pieces of kind of advice we were told by these stakeholders. That's something we can all implement very, very easily. Okay, so finally, looking at how to organize CI optimally within your organization. This is obviously kind of top level. You've all got different structures. We had Raj give us a very good detailed description about how Takeda's organized CI and what they've done over the past few years. So, for example, we're not going to go into that level of detail, and we didn't ask the respondents. But in terms of how happy they are in general with the CI function, they typically on average rated the CI function as about 6 out of 10. So we obviously asked them why. What can move it up to 10? We've definitely got some responses from that about how we can move up that curve. So some of the limitations of CI that were mentioned to us by these respondents. An informal CI structure. So they don't always know who to go for to get CI. It's very informal. There are people doing CI, but perhaps in some of these companies, they're not aware of who that is. Insufficient communication was also mentioned as one of the limitations of CI within these companies. And the absence of real-world impact and inadequate analysis are two other things I wanted to touch on. So what could improve that situation? Having dedicated CI personnel, which I know in our room in some of these companies, I know that a lot of you do have dedicated CI personnel, but not everyone does. And I'm fighting for budget to have these FTEs. Clear executive summary we touched on to help with this decision-making process, and again, actionable insights. And we hear this from our clients as well. If we deliver something to them that doesn't have an actionable insight, it'll often get thrown back. They'll say, well, what am I going to do with this? I can't pass this on. It needs to have an insight, recommendation. And something else that was pretty interesting from these users of CI was about how they would like to interact with their CI managers and also on the vendor side. And one thing that came out was they would really like more interaction, more communication, both with the CI manager and the vendors as well. These collaborative projects, working in a partnership approach, was really, really valued. And actually these brand managers, SVPs, we've worked on projects which had C-suite stakeholders involved. They really wanted to join the update calls and update face-to-face meetings with agencies working on projects for them. So you can invite them. They really, really value it, and they feel like they're often not left out of that. They have full faith in their CI managers, but they would just like to get involved so they can also help. They can give more direction. At the end of the day, everyone wants the internal stakeholders to be happy with the results. So by getting them more involved, we can definitely make sure that happens. The users of CI also definitely realise that CI has a finite shelf life. It's very, very good that they realise this. That if we deliver something, perhaps it's too late. And if we told them a few weeks earlier, then they would have actually been able to use it to make their decision. So I think we've all got kind of a responsibility to make sure we deliver that CI on time. Make sure you're confident in it, make sure we're confident in it, but rather than sitting on it, get it out there, and then it can be discussed. If we need to do more thinking, more research, and that can happen. And finally, or almost finally, using opportunities to highlight success stories. So quite often, because it's such a fast-moving world we live in nowadays, we're talking about data used to be every month, then it was every week, and now you can get it every day. You have breaking news alerts coming into your iPhone and Blackberries. So people forget about CI projects, unfortunately, because they've had the results, they use them, hopefully, to make their decision, and then they move on from it. But if something does happen, which CI either predicted, or we had strong recommendation or confidence that this was going to happen, let's tell them, let's remind them. This is what the CI department said was going to happen, and look, lo and behold, it did. There's no shame in kind of a little bit of blowing your own trumpet and showing the value of CI and reminding these internal stakeholders. Just to summarize and conclude before I open up the floor to some questions, I think it's key to understand who are your key customers related to each decision being made and tailor the intelligence for them. Continue educating key stakeholders. You're always going to have new stakeholders coming onto teams, and perhaps they don't know what CI can get, what the value of CI is, and can we get CI a place in a SOP within all these companies. Understand the importance of the decision, what will it impact, and how can we deliver decision-focused CI. Tailoring the amount and the type of information according to that decision can be crucial. And collaborating with your internal clients as well as vendors. Get us all working together. So inviting them to these meetings, the update meetings, face-to-face meetings, teleconferences. Meeting with internal clients, ideally weekly, is what was mentioned by some of these stakeholders. Go a long way. And let's succinctly and properly deliver information to maximise the impact of CI. And finally, as I said, let's not be afraid to tell these stakeholders when CI is actually being successful. So thank you very much for your attention, and I would love to answer any questions anyone has.
When you talk about budgeting and stuff, did you ask them sort of average size of the project or how much and how do they go about getting the money?
We did, and they varied dramatically from $10,000 to close to $1 million, depending on what the project was, what the decision being made was. In terms of getting the money, no, we didn't ask them about that. That's up to them. There's nothing we can do to influence that. We would typically advise on if there's scope that we can change to accommodate a certain budget, but typically we're not privy to that. Any more questions? No?
Jodie, thank you very much. It is very important to understand what our internal customers think and want. And one question related to the survey, that market research is more well known than CI. from the old internal customers. Am I correct? My understanding is correct?
Yes, typically more, not necessarily more well known, but more used for decisions. But CI is in there, it's up there, it's very high, very close. And as I said, one of the reasons why was because they felt like and they had access to market research more readily available. And that leads us to this perhaps internal SharePoint or portal, making sure that internal stakeholders know where the CI results are, who their CI managers are, who they can speak with, and making sure they know the value of CI, because it's a little bit a kind of juxtaposition really, that they understand the value of CI and that it can deliver intelligence and information above and beyond market research. But it can take time, it can be a slower process, and maybe there is some market research already available. And I think there were some comments about kind of the lifespan of CI. And as we touched on, CI's got a finite shelf life. And a lot of these respondents felt like market research had more longevity, so that the market didn't evolve that much in terms of physicians' views about the standard of care, treatment paradigms, etc. Whereas with CI, when we're looking at competitors in particular, things moved a lot faster. So they felt like maybe it was out of date. That's fine, because we're dealing with intelligence, it is faster moving. So I think that's to give some kind of context to those comments.
Thank you very much.